Good evening and welcome to DLP TV, Honest Voices for the People. Maxine, McClean stepping in this evening to give my dear friend Ramon a break. And with me as my team are on my left, Senator Ryan Walters, and on my right, Mr. Nathaniel Boyce. I'm sure many of you would have seen both of these gentlemen and heard them before. Senator Walters is a little more visible because of his years in advocating for the people in St. Michael Northwest, my place of birth. And of course, but Nathaniel has been working behind the scenes, doing something which I consider to be ultimately of ultimate critical importance as a teacher at the Luther Thorne School, shaping the minds and thinking of our children. The foundations are very critical. But this evening, we're going to talk about an important ministry. The title of the discussion this evening is the Afreximbank is here, but with a mist. And for those who are not sure what we mean when we say mist, we are talking about the Ministry of Industry, Innovation, Science and Technology. And as you know, we have just gone through the estimates exercise and the budget exercise. And during that process, there were some changes. And in fact, one of those changes resulted in us not hearing from the minister responsible for MIST. It might be somewhat of a mystery. What happened, I still do not know, because it so happened that I was sitting in the visitors gallery in the House of Assembly on that day, expecting to see the minister and the officials from the public officers in the well of Parliament, but that did not happen. And so, given all that we have been concerned about in Barbados, if I could set a context, as I said, we have this new Import-Export Bank, which has been in existence for 30 years. The issues surrounding that, of course, the Democratic Labour Party will speak to in substantial ways in the future, but I think I am speaking to it in order to contextualize what we are going to look at today. The Afreximbank, as you know, is, as I said, a trade bank. It's not a commercial bank in the sense that it deals with consumer banking, that is individuals depositing money and so on. It exists to facilitate trade and development. It works with private sector entities looking for financing. And in doing so, my question is, if we examine the Ministry of Industry, Innovation, Science and Technology, and I think sometimes it is critical that we spell it out so people understand the full scope of the ministry, then we have a sense of the important role that it should be playing in the development of Barbados, more specifically the economic sector, fostering innovation, as it says, and so on. So in order to do that, before I invite my colleagues here to jump into the discussion, I think I've put together a bit of information and I put it on a PowerPoint presentation so that while you listen to me, you can look at some of these points. And one of the first things that we have to look at is what exactly is the purpose, what is this ministry doing? And to understand what it is doing, it would be useful to look at the strategic goals of the ministry. And if I can list them, I think there are about 6 goals, and I would read them so that I don't forget them or shortchange the ministry in describing what it does. One, it is supposed to lead the digital transformation agenda across the public service. Secondly, it is to facilitate continuous training and upskilling in the area of information communication technologies for all persons. Important in relation to what I said earlier, it is to lead the industrial transformation across Barbados, thus facilitating the growth of micro, small, and medium-sized agencies, allowing them to export their products and services. The fourth goal is to create synergies to support a culture of innovation and creativity towards the development of businesses and entrepreneurship. Well, it says ships, but I would say entrepreneurship within the communities. fostering the creation of a national innovation system. And then the last one is to ensure that the implementation of digital solutions are customer centric. Now, for me, these things often sound very good. And before I invite my two colleagues to react to these strategic goals from their perspective, remembering, of course, that Ryan, Senator Walters, let me give you your official title. I know Ryan is who I call you and so on, but I think sometimes we have to remind people of not just the title, but what is the significance of that. And so before I ask Senator Walters and Mr. Boyce, sir, as I know my school days, I still remember those things. From before I ask them to react to those objectives, those strategic goals rather, let me say that clearly when we look at those strategic goals, there are 6 of them identified. They tell us something about the purpose. Now, part of what I'm seeing here is when you talk about digital transformation agenda across the public sector. If we want to be truly innovative, what this is suggesting is that we have to have a public service that has the capacity to utilize technology. And then, of course, we talk about communication technology for all persons. Now, I'm going to stop there because for a minute, because I am still mindful in my years of teaching that if we talk too long, we lose our students, and in this case, our audience. So, having said that, perhaps I can go to you, Ryan, from and you can share from your perspective. What is your reaction to those goals, and what you think this ministry should be doing, and any preliminary thoughts that you may have?
Good night. Thank you, Maxine. Good night to all the viewers of DLP TV. Good to be here again. It is my second opportunity to be on the show. So I'm grateful to be here among Maxine and Comrade Boyce, Nathaniel, this evening. I think, first of all, before we actually get into it, although there were, just to respond to something that you said as you were waiting for the then minister to present in Parliament and to face questions from the leader of the opposition and the other parliamentarians. Although that was lost, it wasn't lost because her replacement is in the Senate. And that's true. And Senator Reid would have had an hour to share some of the developments within the ministry. But I think what we saw was an hour spent, or at least most of it spent, on these lofty goals and these lofty sweet phrases and reuse of the words innovation and global leaders and all these things, which is following the position that most senators hold by supporting the Prime Minister anyhow. But you didn't get a chance to actually hear, although I think the opportunity was there, at least for an hour, for the minister to give an account, even though he may not have been in deep with what has happened, but at least share some of those successes that the ministry would have had over the year. Maybe those successes are few, and then they just need to rethink what they're doing as a government as it relates to the industry, innovation, science, and technology. But I think we benefit here tonight, Maxine, from having somebody like you to moderate the show. Maybe it will be good for us to dive into what is industry, what is innovation, and what is science and technology. And then let us see how maybe those link back to these strategic goals. Because quite often, I find that we just put a list of things there, and then they don't really connect with what the overarching goal is. And I will lean on you now to explain what industry is. Okay. You're more from an education perspective, and I will share my perspectives on it. So can you do that?
Before I do that, and I made a note, I would probably ask Nathaniel to react to the goals and so on.
Good night, everybody, and thank you too for once again being on the show, my second time as well. And I was looking at one of the goals in terms of skills and scaling like individuals in the different sectors. I can always use in my sector, which is education, where even during COVID, you realize you had EduTech 2000, and you put the cart before the horse, where we had computers and a situation where we didn't have connectivity, and so we didn't have some resources to take it forward. We had COVID step in, and we realized that even as teachers, we were not trained to even use the simple platforms to go. Parents to about children, and we got a little short crash course of over 2 hours in terms of how to use it. So we are at the junction now where obviously we are trying to digitize across the board, and even in schools now as we speak, it's still not ready. I thought COVID would have taught us a lesson in terms of prepare ourselves going forward, but it seems to have not. Obviously, we have a situation where we do have workshops, some teachers to retool, but I believe across the board, all the teachers should be involved in terms of retooling, learning simple things, sometimes too, some teachers in terms of using simple software. And industry, you know that industry across the board, we look at it in terms of going forward, digitizing, it is going to be a challenge. Industry, we know I will try not to jump in too much before we get into different aspects of industry, innovation, science, and technology. But industry is the backbone that we will have to take us forward. So I just, that one would have jumped out at me in terms of obviously upskilling, making sure that persons, even across the other sectors, that they're able to, to retool, they're skilled enough in their various aspects of their work to take the government down, take the country forward.
I got some stuff about industry.
Okay, you wanted, well, okay, let me just very quickly pull together what I'm hearing, and then perhaps Nathaniel will help me make sure that he answers his question. I will try to do so in very simple ways. I like to keep it simple.
Yeah, me too.
Basically, what I'm hearing from you, Ryan, is that in reaction to what you heard in the Senate, and I did not even remember, I did hear some of the presentation by the new minister, and I was able actually to contrast his initial comments with some others that I heard from one of his Senate colleagues, but I will let him stay where he is. I'll come to him another time because education and factors in here as well. But what you say was he was able, I suppose, as a new minister, to present to Barbadians his understanding of these goals. But he was not able to do what you would expect, well, what normally would happen. And in all fairness to him, this was his maiden speech, etc. But you were unable to hear any celebratory kinds of, this is what we've been able to achieve given these goals, and I'm happy to take this ministry under my wing because it is out there demonstrating that is an exemplar, etc. And what I'm hearing you say, Nathaniel, is that when we talk about technologies for all persons, as a teacher in the primary school system, and reflecting on what the now Prime Minister, who was Minister of Education, failed to do in terms of laying the groundwork with EduTech, we have a situation, and then you made reference to what we were forced to do with COVID, that what you had happen, or what should happen, is that we should have teachers in the case of the preparing of because these persons, all persons include our children, that they are coming into a world where technology, according to all that we hear espoused by the government, and and what is necessary, is that we need to be capable of connecting to technology in several ways, starting, of course, from children. Now, if we move beyond the element of the human resource, if we move beyond the element of human resources to look at the other critical importance of what is, what does the name of the ministry imply or mean? Now, if we're talking about industry, we're talking about those activities which create value in terms of business, provision of support services, etc. So if we think about manufacturing, we are talking about opportunities which will create employment, which would allow people to apply their intellectual capacities, their knowledge, and so on, to addressing whether it is solving problems, creating new products and services, etc., and basically creating a sector. For example, if we look at the economy of Barbados, what we are we talk about tourism, we talk about agriculture, we talk about industry and commerce. And so I think as I said, those activities which facilitate business ownership, which facilitate entrepreneurship, which allow people to earn and so on through manufacturing, through the development of services, designing of products, etc. All of those things come together. Now, what is innovation? Innovation, of course, is doing things differently, bringing new ideas, and everything that we have is not necessarily new to the world, but we can think in terms of new ways of doing things, new solving problems differently, applying different techniques, technologies, etc. And that is where I think the whole notion of science and technology comes in, because a lot of what we are seeing develop draws on science and technology, whether we're talking the sciences like biology, chemistry, physics, we're talking engineering in its several facets, and and the use of information, computers, and that kind of thing. So I'm trying to keep it simple. So I hope that gels with your own thinking of what it is.
Yes, it does. And if you think about industry, if you go back to industry, retail is an industry, manufacturing is an industry, healthcare is an industry, small business is an industry. So when they hear Ministry of Industry, we are thinking about individual groups of businesses or interest groups that are doing similar activity, right? And what it also speaks to is then how does a government create new industry, right? So it's not only about servicing the industries that they have, but also what are the new industries that are coming out from the government. So I see this, it seems to be packaged in a way that doesn't really support like what is the next revenue earning potential for the government. I think it really has, when they hear industry, it has a big role to play in what are those things down the road that the government can get involved in that could be revenue generating to help reduce taxes or to help increase the revenue take from replace our current foreign exchange, add to the foreign exchange. So those type of things is what I'm thinking when I hear about industry. So we're talking about how do we move manufacturing from A to B? We know manufacturing is something that we talk about all the time. I will pull up some reports to show that the government has really not done anything in manufacturing substantial. We're not producing more than we produced before, and this is like 7 years on. The data tells you that. When you look at small business sector, the flagship policy of this government is trust loan funds. And that is all they write on when it comes to small businesses. Give them $5,000 and whoo, you have a small business.
I like your description, flagship.
Yeah, that's it. Because they don't speak very little about anything else as it relates to small business, micro to small business. I mean, if you know, well, you would know, Maxine, that 90% to 92%, at least pre-COVID, of our businesses were micro and small businesses and medium-sized businesses. And with the advent of COVID, I think that increased. Coming out of COVID, more persons found entrepreneurship and small business as an avenue to feed themselves and to be employed in for themselves. So you have the industry of manufacturing, you have the industry of small business, you have the consumerism part of it, or which is the retail side of it, the business of retail, and how do we treat to that? What are the innovative things now coming out of the retail sector? How does a government respond to the shocks and the realities of everyday Barbadians. Right. So it's, to me, I think there's so much more in here than just thinking about, apps and, new computers and digitization and so forth. There's so much that can come out when you talk about industry and innovation in the context of a ministry that is supposed to be industry driven and innovative. Right? You would expect something more to come out of it. And just before you come back in, the Senator Reid, who's the new minister, he didn't connect these dots. He spoke about 2,500 new jobs for young Barbadians. Like, this is just the same old, this gets like the same old promises, same old lofty promises. Government premier service ministry, right? Before the government can become a premier service ministry, they have to do basic things. And one of that thing is to get cybersecurity right. Right? And not much was said about cybersecurity. And that is one of the things that is very important and dear to any efforts within the science and technology and ministry as well. So when we look at, as I said, Maxine, when we look at industry, I think we must be focused on what we have existing. How do we grow these? How do we expand them? How do we enfranchise these industries? But then, what are the new opportunities coming out that Barbados can leverage on in a couple months, in years? Looking down the road now, what do we have on the table?
Okay, I thank you for that, and I'm just gonna ask if there's anything you want to add.
Just a small bit in terms of industry as well. I'm sure around as he move around, the community see person not even waiting on the government. They're starting little businesses, trying to be entrepreneurs. So you find that there's small little industries. They're trying to not get any help that they should, but just trying to start something. Because the current situation, the cost of living, is pretty high. So persons who have you might feel they're trying to be creative using probably some talents that they may have, skill, to create an industry for themselves. So we'll just piggyback on that one in terms of community industries coming forward. And I don't know the 2,500 because I think if he's going to say 2,500, he needs to be more direct and say, well, in terms of the industries that they're looking to bring, to the people. Because I saw it recently in the paper, all of a sudden they're having these job fairs or skills, something that, right? I guess giving young people the impression that, there's something there for you in the next few months, I guess, because we know what was probably looking to happen. So we wait to see if anything will materialize that.
I think, and I'm just going to react because I'm going to say something more about the ministry in a second, but I just want to react to your comment about what people are doing in the community in terms of trying to start up small businesses and so on. And it was my honor, gosh, Ryan, if I try, Nathaniel, I remember how many years ago, sometime in the probably late 80s, early 90s, I introduced the first course in entrepreneurship at KFL. And one of the things that I said to my students there, and of course, it was a very practical course, but entrepreneurship, innovation, all of these things do have conceptual and theoretical groundings because theory is distilled from practice and practice evolves out of theory. But one of the things that would have been discovered and identified in research about small business startups is that oftentimes when economies or people in a community or society are having a hard time, they often turn to small business. Now, of course, in a country like Barbados, and this is where the 5,000 comes in, a person who I would label it a lifestyle business. That's one of the terms they used in the literature back then. I have to find out. But lifestyle to the extent that this was not something that was going to make you rich. So when you identify that, Nathaniel, as a reality, it probably is symptomatic of the challenges that people are facing. They're not getting jobs, or the earnings are not sufficient. They're not getting a livable wage. They need to subsidize and so on. And so what you're seeing, that is happening. Now, if that is the case, government cannot boast I like the term, let me go back, the flagship
Flagship.
policy
Ah.
of a $5,000. That is fine for those who want that kind of assistance. But of course, we know that they run into difficulties, people sometimes being able to service that. But
Yes.
that is important. But that, and I also don't want to get carried away,
Mhm.
but I also draw a distinction when we talk about innovation between a startup doing something that everybody's
Everybody does.
doing and doing the
Yeah.
same way as just a small business,
Mhm.
a micro business or whatever.
Yeah.
They're not entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
because entrepreneurs are the ones who go there and try to well, you
Fix
know,
problems, solve problems.
problem solve,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so we could get into that, but
Mhm.
I don't want us to go too
Okay.
much into that, because you're taking me into something which
Right.
is dear to my heart. But what I want to do, so that people understand what this, before we start to look at a couple of the
Mhm.
elements of this, I took the chance to look at the last three estimates documents, the 2023-24, the 2024-25, and the one this year for 2025-26. And for in this year, the budget allocation for the Ministry of Industry, Innovation, Science and Technology was $69,194,708. And it is broken down into a number of broad categories. And I wanted to share that with you so people understand that when we are not hearing much about this ministry, we have to appreciate that this is a ministry that is pivotal to the growth of this economy, the growth of Barbados, generation of those 2,500 jobs.
Mhm.
So, for example, the broad that you have, it's, in the estimates, you call it, hey, 31, but then they have what I would call sections. So one area is direction and policy formulation. And under there you have general management and coordinating services, which will probably be the general running of the ministry, science, market research, and innovation, public sector modernization program, and then industry. Then it has application of modern information technology, digital solutions, cybersecurity, data protection commission, and this one was added this year. It was not listed in the other two estimates, the two previous financial years. Then something called shared services, technical management unit, digital infrastructure. And I would pause to say there that when you look at that second broad category, you mentioned the whole issue of I'm trying to remember which one, the cyber insecurity, I would call it that way. The data breaches that we have had.
Mhm.
I mean, the impact that it has had on government operations, on private sector operations. So in essence, one of the things based on what they were saying as these goals, the transformation, digital transformation in the public service, and you have breaches at the hospital, breaches at every ministry that you can
Yes.
think about. So that's one of the concerns there. So when we start to talk about the performance of the ministry, the question is, how do they rate themselves and how do Barbadians rate them along it? The other area that is included there was the development of management structures, and under that you had something called the efficiency unit. I hope it isn't endorsed, but no, let us not go there. And then you have,
are high though.
and then you have the establishment of GovTech agency. I'm going to speak to that in a minute. And then there's a big one, which brings us into what we were saying earlier, the investment, industrial and export development. And under there you had Barbados Investment and Development Corporation. If you gentlemen would bear with me, I'm going to share I'm going to talk about a couple of these, and we can probably, if I can see the slide that talks about the Barbados Investment and Development Corporation. This is the one that you talked about, overseeing a whole set of things.
Mhm.
And what that is saying, basically, I took this from the one of the documents of the Barbados Investment and Development Corporation called BIDC. But I find it interesting because in talking about itself, this is what the agency had to say. The Barbados Investment and Development Corporation, BIDC, commenced operations on December 1, 1992, for the purpose of developing Barbados's industrial export and other related activities. Chapter 340 is the act, that's of course the laws of Barbados, is the act that governs the corporation's existence, establishing it as a world-class export-driven economic development agency. Since 2021, it has traded as Export Barbados, BIDC. We are cognizant that export-oriented industries are central to economic development given our market of just 300,000 persons. I'll pause there. But no, let me just read the second one about export. The second one, it says the Barbados, it talks about Export Barbados. And then we can have a little conversation about that trading since 2021 as Export Barbados. Export Barbados exists to amplify bold, innovative, dynamic, and creative businesses. Export Barbados is a solutions-oriented organization working to amplify bold, innovative, dynamic, and creative enterprises. An agency of the Barbados government, our mandate is to contribute to the diversification and growth of the economy through new investment, increased exports, and employment creation by fostering the development of competitive business enterprises. I will pause there, gentlemen, and ask you how you want to react to those two slides, talking about BIDC or Export Barbados. And I'm not a lawyer, but I'm trying to understand the trading and, but maybe one of our viewers could help me with that, or we can flag it and come back to it.
It's one of those things where I think the government has been bragging about Export Barbados, Business Barbados, Invest Barbados. So it's like almost like a theme that they're pushing out there. But that aside, it is supposed to facilitate export. That means that we're trying to earn foreign exchange. That brings into question our competitiveness is the number one issue when it comes to export. And when you talk about, and that's why we talk about how do we think, and how do we position government in general. One of the biggest things that is driving our costs up, but two of the biggest things is labor costs and energy costs. We can't do anything about labor costs. We got to pay proper wages. We got to make sure that people have a proper standard of living. But energy costs. So, and that's why we can segue into this energy conversation for 2 minutes, because I personally believe that how this government has gone about this whole energy revolution has messed it up, right? And when I'm thinking about energy and being a positive effort on the homes and businesses, is to reduce costs, not as an additional revenue earning stream. You see, so I would imagine that a person that is now selling an item, making an item, and using current energy costs might have a unit price of $5. And with the implementation of renewable energy, you can see that price move from $5 to $3 to increase our competitiveness. Because if we don't increase our competitiveness, we don't get to export, right? We stay stagnant, we probably keep our levels. We have to be even more innovative as well, because then we have to really shoot out new, fresh products that other markets are not doing, and look at niche markets, etc. But we have to build scale as well. And we build scale by being competitive, right? So the energy thrust, as you say it now, is focused on investment, which is how much can my rooftop earn, and not how much can I reduce my costs. And if you're driving your costs down, that means you're also driving the cost of living down in the country, on the shelves of Barbados. Local products are consumed more than imported products. Then you can work more on import substitution as a country, and you could start to save that foreign exchange. Know that we keep having to borrow to prop up our reserves. So that's one of the things that jump out at me when I think about this export Barbados and its mandate. And the government should be a driver in reducing the cost of what we manufacture here for export by by enabling a better functioning energy integration into manufacturing that lowers costs and takes the word investment out of the conversation as relates to our export capacity.
Now, one of the things, and I just would say, in addition to limiting our ability to compete internationally or regionally, is also making it difficult for, let's say, a local manufacturer to compete domestically as well.
Yes.
Because if as much as my product may be good, if my budget is limited, I have to make a decision about do I support Barbados products or do I buy what my money can give me the biggest bang for the buck, so to speak. And so that is an important issue. So what it says to me is that when you're talking about this whole notion of export, the other point, well, before I make that point, let me ask you if there's anything, Nathaniel, that you want to add in terms of this whole issue of, the role of the IBC. And
I'll just briefly say the obviously industry innovation drives this progress going forward. As Ryan said, he said energy will also part put in their communication, transportation as well.
Yes, transportation.
Obviously, we have a situation where if you don't have the correct infrastructure in place for these two, we're going to have a situation because obviously in terms of transport, especially you see what's happening now internationally in terms of the tariffs, and then persons are talking about in terms of transporting goods, costs are going up, which then it comes forward and then comes here now to Barbados now. We're having some standards increase. There's something you're part of paying maybe $20 per now, $60 or so. We see this like begin to play out across the board. So if I might want to Ryan said, we'll just add a little bit to that in terms of the infrastructure. We have to non-renewable energy too, right?
Yeah.
Because that is the way to going forward to where we can cut some costs.
Right, that's what we're talking about.
I want to ask you a question, but as a teacher and as a teacher of young children, because as I was listening to you, and I said to myself, we're talking about innovation, entrepreneurship, buying local, understanding the need to be competitive, etc. What perhaps our children learning or understanding how the economy functions? I mean, how are we seeking to build this into getting our children to understand the workings? I mean, I said I left school a long time. I mean, my son left school a long time too. So I mean, I'm just trying to understand, because remember we are talking about all persons. I go back to the goals. I meant the strategic goals, and they talk about, in other words, impacting all persons when we talk about digital. But if you're talking about the economy and competitiveness, what is happening at the school level from your perspective, or if and what might we want to do?
Well, the primary level, I can say that part is not happening unless our teachers explain certain things what's happening in the world, and so they have an idea. Probably in secondary schools where those children are a lot older, to be able to understand, depending on the type of subjects that they're doing, the principle of business, those other subjects. But at the primary level, you won't get that there. But well, in terms of innovation, what we're seeing too, and I said, we have industry, innovation, science, and technology, and it's a broad base where we have science, because I teach science, and science is a broad base. We have chemistry, biology, physics, some other little thing in there happening, and the science and technology, they're really, although they're interrelated, interconnected, they're separate, right? The situation, obviously, at this point in time, we are teaching robotics. We're doing digital literacy, but we're now doing robotics and coding. And although it's a plus, it's a start for our students at the primary level, going forward up into secondary, into tertiary learning. It has some pros and it also has some cons to it. So it's something that is there happening. I mean, there are other little things that happen in schools too that may not promote, or we have some schools actually not doing as well as other schools. Whether it be have a teacher who may not be how should I put it, might have been placed in a situation whereby they're not at the moment. Let's say that teacher might probably take leave, and the teachers decided to replace them, but the experience and the qualification may not be there, right? As it relates to the coding is a little bit more heavy than the robotics, in that the coding it can require a little bit more critical and analytical thinking. Going forward, also to it lends what's happening is that you don't want first the inclusion to, as it relates to, you may have some children who, how should I put it? You may have some children who have the knack for these, and then other children who may not. So it may take a little longer, to catch on, They don't want to happen. They don't want children who just want to come here all the time and not participate in other activities, foreign activities and stuff. They're just locked on into this world going forward. So it has its pros and its cons going forward. But there's some start in terms of the technological part inside the schools, right? Science too. It needs and at this point, I believe I can probably say that there seems to be some little overhaul coming and reform. Maybe we've had our meeting with the new minister. So we've heard a few things, but we said a few things. So we're looking now to see it actually materialize into existence.
I want to make a comment, and then maybe if there's a reaction, either one of you might. Now, every time people talk about the need for getting our young people aware of the importance of business and so on, they talk about adding to the curriculum. I have a different view. I believe that as we design curriculum, let's say we're talking English, we're talking, I'm not sure what the full range of studies, but if we were talking history, if we were talking, and now if we go to the primary level, we do social studies.
Yes.
Social studies. My question is, how do we build concepts and notions of being entrepreneurial, of seeing business as an opportunity, of seeing the need to think critically into English? For example, students have to do comprehension, if that's the, am I talking? Oh Lord.
So the comprehension.
There's something to say. But so in other words, I'm thinking that if I had to write passages or pieces for comprehension, why there's an opportunity. Let me put it this way, and this is something I used to explore with my son's nursery and primary school teacher. Why aren't we seeing? And this is where opportunities exist for teachers now to be entrepreneurial. Why aren't we seeing more materials utilized in the classroom rather than say, I want to see children being taught about business in a course, in a subject, rather than introduce the subjects or the topics or the issues within some of the standard. Yes. So in other words, when you set an arithmetic or math problem, it is done in a way that they start to understand pricing, understand, all kinds of whatever. I mean, for example, so I am saying that these things can be infused in the existing curriculum in terms of teachers sitting down and saying, you know what, let me design some books or materials that really achieve the objective of having the child read and demonstrate his or her ability to do comprehension, but it is not some abstract whatever, because the other question I was going to ask you in terms of the robotics and coding, what is the context in which the children are introduced to these things? They're just, I think, and that is something that we may want to look at. In other words, I am learning to code to what end?
But to what end, correct.
This robotics course or exercise is interesting, but what do I do with it? So that a child, because I mean, it has to be age appropriate. But I'm just wondering, because it takes me back to my days, Lordy, when I did French, because I didn't do Spanish at school. But we were taught a foreign language in a way that you never would have learned to speak it at all. You know, nowadays you have new technologies. I'm just saying that when we talk about innovation, and so on, that rather than, you know, talk in these abstract, fancy terms that I've heard some people do, you know, when you read statements coming from the Ministry of Education and so on, sit down with the teachers, sit down with the parents, sit down with retired teachers and say, okay, this is the kind of basic information that we want to get youngsters to understand what it means, what competitiveness means, what productivity means, what being innovative means. So in other words, what you know, things about making business ownership not some remote issue, but something that can be, you know, seen as something to happen. And so I'm just thinking that when we start to read these fancy, lofty words, that my question is, how do we break it down? When I attempted to ask such a question, I incurred the ire of one of the ministers, but he obviously didn't understand it. But you know what I was trying to say, or pretended not to. But I don't know any reaction to that, right?
But to support, I agree. I agree with you. We need to infuse these new subjects, these new areas of reality that we want to expose the children to within our education system, within our current curriculum. I think one of the good examples of that too is this national financial literacy program.
Yep.
And there's a group of very competent persons who are going around teaching literacy, financial literacy in schools. But it's not in the program. They're not teachers per se, right? So I don't think it's a good use of resources. I think that if you have such a program, even if you had a program, it should be from trained teachers who can also augment the failings in the system, can also be a support to Nathaniel, can be a support to others, not just come in and go. But the point is that a lot of the things that they're teaching, from what I've seen, are things that could be incorporated in the current curriculums, that maths and English and so forth, especially mathematics. So I totally agree with you. It's happening across the education system for sure.
No, I agree. I smile because financial literacy is something I remember when I was on the Board of Governors Enterprises Limited. They had adopted St. Mary's Primary School, and we would have. Well, this is working with the PTA, and we went in and we did. I was asked to do sessions. I have an article somebody sent me the other day, ages ago, from a newspaper, where we were doing sessions with the parents. Now, as you were speaking, I am seeing a math problem, which talks about calculating interest or the profits on John or Jane selling particular items or making something, pricing it, and so on. And an English course where a child is asked to read a passage and do some comprehension on that passage, which talks about this young entrepreneur, parent, or whoever. So as you say, to bring first of all, my question would be, in doing this, while it is laudable, are they communicating to the children in the most appropriate language? Are they using examples that make sense?
True.
You know, because I'll give you an example. You talk about personal financial management. If you go to speak to a group of parents who are basically earning $300 a week or $400 a week, somebody might say, but what are you going to talk about financial and investment? I tell you can. Because what you start to do is you show them how they can manage their spending on certain things that are, and I will not use examples because I might touch you. You may consume less fast food. Let me put it that way.
Okay.
No, but in terms of also giving their children, you know, small amounts of money to budget and manage. And so I'm just thinking that as we talk about innovation, etc., and we're talking about reaching all people, going back to that whole notion of getting people to be innovative or whatever, that we have that ourselves starting from our school system to do that in order to create a mindset.
We've got to be more
in our
practical.
children.
We've got to be more practical, because if I'm thinking a son of a shopkeeper will be more entrepreneurially driven, because he sometimes manages the shop and make the change when somebody comes to buy a pack of soda bits. So maybe we need to be more practical in these subjects as well. What were the opportunities for the students themselves to manage those entrepreneurial opportunities in a school environment or in a plant environment of teaching?
I would just add, in terms of, let's use the same example, buying and selling class 4s. And sometimes you set up little shops, children set up shops, and you have the various items, have them priced. But even go a step further. I remember I would have assisted on a tour. We went to Chanel supermarket. So we went to a supermarket, and the children were able to see, in terms of to that part of it, in terms of buying and selling, and also money, how money is changing, pricing and stuff. I think more could well be done too, in terms of even in the low role playing, getting opportunity to probably maybe check a few items. We do, well, my school, sometimes we would invite professionals, probably like Brian in their fields, to come in and probably will speak to the students to give them a little better understanding to what is happening. Because obviously the teacher is not that professional. We can speak certain things, but they can even probably able to break it down to a language that the children all can understand.
And the children, to add to you, I am remembering and picturing my youngest daughter, Sky. She has a small business. So she makes these scrunchies that you put in your hair. Right. So she makes it from scratch, crochet or whatever. So, but my wife taught her how to make these scrunchies. But what we did is we purchased all the product, and then she was making the scrunchies, and she was selling them. She was selling them, making the money, and making me pay back the product to make them. So she didn't understand the concept of reinvesting. So Sky, you gotta give me back some of their money that they made, so we could go buy the stock. But then she told me that that's my investment. Her business, right? So the point is that she went around and everybody started buying stuff for her. She was making, but it was an interesting exercise, because you have to. It's a 360, and it has, if it's hands-on and practical, I think they get a better appreciation for it. So those simulations, as you said, in terms of buying and selling and making and selling and stuff like that, is very interesting.
And I was just saying that because I did mention that. I remember seeing a few of my students, they occupied Sky Mall, so they're making like and I thought it was very, very well executed. They're making some crafts, others just making difference, and they were selling, and the parents were there, but they were allowing them to practice trade,
Yeah, it's very interesting. So, but Maxine, back to this whole export.
Yes.
Barbados, BADC, the export Barbados. I think when they look at the Central Bank report for 2024 December,
right,
between 2019 and 2024, exports fell as a percentage of GDP in almost all those years. And actually, they're still below 2019. Right? So it tells you that as the government claims that the economy is growing, these things are lagging behind. So what's really, we're not going to get into that, but what's really driving the growth? That's another conversation.
But we have to flag it.
But it is, so it is things like this that make sure we are not in a better position than we were before. Because if we are not making more, especially in an inflationary environment where prices are rising, we are still behind 2019 and 2018 for exports as a percentage of GDP. We're not growing these sectors as we should. So again, industry is stagnant or on a decline, right? And for sure, this is a direct indication that we've not found how we can grow our exports. And as I told you, we got to look at how competitive we are. Now we got to look at also our land space. We're small. I'm sure somewhere in the world, there's a factory as big as the size of Barbados, right? But we see ourselves as individual players. And what is the role then of Export Barbados, allowing us not to see ourselves as individual players? Why don't we have brand Barbados? Just to use the term loosely. In other words, picture a big brand like Goya.
Mm-hmm.
They have peas. I know all the things they have, but I can exaggerate. They got peas, they got rice, they got kidney beans. They have a whole set of different things, but it is branded that it builds awareness about the product. It builds trust and it builds a customer base, right? And then obviously you get innovation. So you move from peas to, I don't know, a substitute or something that offer the peas, but it allows you to innovate.
Right.
But the problem is a brand that is recognizable, and you then build your brand.
Mm-hmm.
So we cannot allow our small exporters to be subjected to going up against these brands.
Now that's important. In fact, as you talked about that, but again, part of it, what you do obviously would be to identify niche market.
Mm-hmm.
And as you were talking about that, my recollection is that somewhere in Newton, the BIDC export bar, I'm not sure which one to call it. I call it BIDC because I'm going to get back to those two titles rather.
Mm-hmm.
There's this International Food Science Center. Mm-hmm. And I recall seeing probably some promos in relation to that. And so my question really, because I was trying to locate an annual report of the BIDC. I don't know if you've come across one, if any have been laid in Parliament, because normally those reports are laid in Parliament. And if it hasn't been, then it's unlikely. Well, you can tell me if you found one, but there's this International Food Science Center. My question is, who is it catering to? How? Because I'm trying to remember, it's been operational for a couple of years. I have to go back and check. Maybe about 3 years.
Yeah.
What has been as I say, who is it catering to? What are they, doing at that food center? Mm-hmm. Because even though we may not be able to compete with the Goya, as I started to say earlier, there are niche markets for products now. But before we get to export, we got to produce here and test the market and test your product and so on. So in essence, that's one of the concerns I have with that export title. Are we now focusing? In other words, let me ask you a question: how are the different needs of different categories of business owners budding, aspiring business owners, entrepreneurs, etc., being met? Because my recollection, and this is in another life when I worked for myself after teaching entrepreneurship, I had to prove that I could do it too. Working with small businesses, etc., they could go to BIDC and get certain kind of technical assistance, etc. Not necessarily because they're ready to export, because they may not even contemplate exporting at all, because they may figure, based on the business model that I have, based on my vision for where I want to take this business, how big I want to grow it, what's the purpose of getting into business. I am happy servicing a local market. Or even though I may have an intention of going into a business that exports, I still want to test my product and work out the kinks and all of this. And so my question is really, what is happening to those people? And because I'm not seeing or hearing enough. I keep hearing about exports, and I keep hearing a lot of, I use the term buzzwords, and it upsets people, but I will use it forever, because if it is just a fancy term that buzzing around in people's heads, and you can't hold it and point to some concrete things, then that's a concern I have, because
the facility is a critical part of the whole export business, though, because my understanding of the facility is that it brings the business owner to a certain standard, right? And obviously you have to have standards. In other words,
that's for the local market as well.
In other words, you don't want somebody making juice with a bucket and a back stack, but you want to have a facility that they can produce safe health and safety standards, HACCP certified,
Label.
all those different things from labeling, all those different. So I think it has its place, but it's now how do you leverage it? And to your point, it's not that we really want to compete against Goya, but even in a niche market, you want to be identifiable,
and
right? And strong. So we recognize that there's opportunity for breadfruits, for example.
which we use to export one.
We export. Nathaniel breadfruit, Maxine breadfruit, Ryan breadfruit. Doesn't have the impact behind it that as if you were to package it as a strong Bayesian brand, right? So just so those little opportunities in terms of how do you build brand, right? Because of our size, right?
One of the examples, if I might, I remember year before, there would have been, I think the last time that it was called, it wasn't, there was this trade show, what did they used to call it? BMX used to be BMX before, but they called it something else the last time around. What was it?
You mean the manufacturing expo?
Yeah, but it was.
It's called it different. Man,
It's not BMX anymore because BMX was the one that we heard for years, but they called it. It will come back to me because I remember being there, and I saw BIDC had a brand of hot sauces and so on. I'm not sure if it was I assume it was at a BIDC store, but the question is that a BIDC product? Because what it approximates something that you're talking about in the sense that this is a brand that can be recognized, but it may just be another brand as you have ABC, anti this and that brands.
Correct.
But is this were they trying to come up with one that would be for once I would call it a national or umbrella type brand that becomes associated with the country? Or is this something that BIDC itself was demonstrating to businesses that this is what can happen? I'm not sure because I saw it and the name will come back.
It's just something to think about, because if the Prime Minister in her travels takes up Maxine pepper sauce, I would feel bad that she didn't take Ryan pepper sauce. But all this pepper sauce. Right?
Yours and mine might be different.
But
If you came
together, you can have different blends. You can have a different thing. So we're not taking away from that individual innovation, that individual blend, and so forth. But it is a brand that we're talking about.
So in essence,
right?
what you do is you conceptualize one that has some particular, because one of them, I saw them, but it has. In other words, we're making hot sauces, but there's a particular thing that I add to mine that probably gives you.
I don't let's get into that. All I want to say, right, is that I don't want us to have our small manufacturers and business people competing with themselves, with one another for export markets. We're fighting for the same market share because it's a niche market, and they're almost trying to wrestle one another. Or staying stagnant. Right? It is how you leverage it.
International.
Correct.
But of course, that leads the whole set. But I think it is an important one. And the question I would ask is, as I said, because you said it's a good idea, but my question is what has happened.
Yeah.
I want to kind of, you want to say something before?
No, I was listening to Ryan because from his business perspective in terms of having all of us having different thoughts in terms of obviously trying to export. If we try then to export to, say, mine goes to Europe, yours go to USA, somebody else go to Africa, if that will make a difference, because at the end of the day, we want to get it out there and get as much from it as possible.
And you want the person to be able to, if they made 10 bottles today, by next year they're making 25 bottles. That's the growth that you are not seeing when you look at the data. Right?
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Right. No, so it is about leveraging the marketing of it, right? And I'm not sure then what Export Barbados does as relates to marketing, but marketing becomes very difficult when you have so much different brands and so many different identities to market. BTMI markets the Barbados product. So they have their mandate to market the Barbados product. Who is marketing Barbados products that we are manufacturing?
You have just touched on something that I'm gonna ask a related question, and then I want to pull back to some of the things that this ministry is supposed to be doing
Yes.
for the government of the public sector in terms of. So my question really and truly, because we are here basically thinking aloud about what could or should happen.
Yeah, some things.
My question is, given this large portfolio or set of portfolios, because I call it plural when we look at the strategic goals, why are we not seeing reports from this ministry in particular in relation to this particular agency? Because I raise that because normally, at least if I were able to find a recent annual report, in addition to seeing the statistics that you just quoted, where there's a decline in exports, I can probably see what the focus has been, maybe an explanation of what's going wrong. But you're not hearing it. Every now and again, you hear some lofty things. I hear of a lot of young consultants and so on, and I'm happy for them, which might take us into the whole realm of whether they're employees by another name. But there are these people, which I get the impression, because I listened to a program on one of our radio stations, and there's a young voice that I've been hearing talking about these things, but I don't hear concrete numbers. And so I would ask the question, what is happening? Now I want to shift to.
But I want to ask that question though,
go ahead.
Because it speaks to the priorities of the government, right?
Great.
You're splitting. You have the most ministries ever, but the important ones are not the ones that you're isolating to focus on. You have maritime affairs and take it from agriculture. You have no small business. You don't have a focus on the export Barbados or BADC because it's lumped under innovation and cybersecurity and computers and so they have created a whole set of ministries, but they've not identified what they need to focus on so that they can then put those ministries as the focus points. We need foreign exchange.
Okay.
And this ministry is chucked away neatly with innovation, science, and technology, given the same resources every year. If you look back at the trend, it gets the same resources every year. So you're telling me that there's no real priority in terms of building the capacity of our export sector, right? So I don't know what they are doing, but they're obviously on the wrong track when it comes to the priorities that they have to deal with for the country.
And the ministry at the end of the day, as you correctly said, even if you have the ironic thing is that you have some very large, what I would call responsibilities, and some of them are an interesting mix of responsibilities or portfolios. And then you have what I call a slice and dice situation with some other ministries. The Ministry of Education, and still to understand what the education transformation is.
Tertiary education.
Understand that.
As teachers.
And then you have the other, it was training and tertiary education or something like this. But and so that's the slice and dice part of it that is not making sense. But we still basically we have this situation, and I would sum up in relation to the BIDC by saying, in looking at what is presented to the public, the average Barbadian cannot point to some very clear achievements or accomplishments. And that is something that's important, particularly when you keep hearing this is what we're going to do and so on, but when you reference to the numbers, that is an issue. Now, I want to move from there to look at, so was this Barbados export, whatever BIDC was, the shift and so on, to look at some of the things that is supposed to happen. I go back up to the first strategic goal. It says lead the digital transformation agenda across the public service. Now, as we know, the public service delivers a cross-section of services to citizens of this country and visitors and so on. And if we look at, we have a slide here that I had called electronic vehicle registration. And I'm going to look at that and another entity called GovTech Barbados Limited. I don't know if GovTech Barbados Limited rings a bell with you, but I'll say what it is in a minute because most people, if I ask them, can't tell me what
I heard about
about.
it recently. Yeah.
Okay. The first thing is I live across near to TV station that people know where you live here. Near to the National Cultural Foundation, and there was a period, I think 2022, 23,
They
they had
a
a
substation.
and they were doing some things to vehicles, putting some electronic whatever. And so back in February 16, 2023, I captured a clip attributed to CBC News, and it says the Barbados Licensing Authority's electronic vehicle registration EVR program is running smoothly with over 5,700 already tagged under the pilot phase. Under the EVR process, vehicles will be tagged with a radio frequency magnetic sticker known as RFI tag, where the registration, chassis, and engine numbers, insurance status, and name of the vehicle's owner will be stored. You know anything about that? Where are we with that?
Bill, I thought I heard recently that there's some new process. There's a new process.
But so I think that I really want to know. Is it true that they probably started wrong by using some old technology? Because remember, there are some structures if you go down highway to way, and if you go across walk from the bottom, I think you will see some setups there. So I don't know. The question I would ask is how much money was spent on this?
Yeah.
Where are we with it? Is it paused or has it gone into? No, I can't say 530 because it come they set up something, but is it useless? You know, this is a concern because here we are talking about earlier the issue of small business and needing resources and people boasting about $5,000. I mean, as I say, if people can make it work for them and it has made a difference, that is excellent. But there are others who need greater sums. You know, so that's one. So nobody can tell me.
I think it you have to. It brings the question that I have had for a while: is does this government actually think through what it is doing? Right? You spoke, Maxine, about what is the end game for a young person that is coding, that who learns coding at primary school. Is there coding at secondary school, or is there Spanish, French, and Latin when you go into first form? So, what is the end game? Does this government think through what it is doing, right? And clearly they don't. We spoke about the ministries that they choose to isolate, the chopping and changing of them, the implementation. If you look at how the crime prevention Ministry of Crime Prevention came about, it is not thinking through what it is doing. It is reacting, and it is doing so much that it's not getting anything done correct. So there's nothing to put out there in terms of data to say, hey, you know, we have made strides in this area, or we've made strides in another area, because they're doing so much things, because for some reason there's a whole list of items that they need to check off to tell Barbadians that they have done, but they have not done anything well.
No, but that's a serious issue, because my concern is that, and it's like a stop and start situation, and I'm gonna so we really can't say one. Well, this is the question because I'm posing questions.
I don't know if I can probably just add, but those structures, because you've seen these structures appearing, I guess during the COVID period, a lot of structures went up with cameras, and so a lot of money was spent on this equipment, and obviously persons have different notions that in terms of what are these structures really set up for, right? And it's up to track individuals on same license plates, track persons. We're not sure if it was something you said, if it was set up for to do that, just that, and it probably failed. We don't know. So I guess those questions, I guess the government has.
We know it failed. We know why it was set up.
No, but having failed, are they going to start up? Because that whole registration and licensing and monitoring thing. There's a second entity And while I'm at it, I want you to check out something called Future Barbados.
Future Barbados.
Something called GovTech Barbados Limited. And that one is a company that was incorporated on the Companies Act on September 18, 2023. And based on the background, and I mean, I didn't make up these things. I pulled these off of websites and GIS information and so on. GovTech Barbados Limited was incorporated under the Companies Act on September 18, 2023, and is owned by the government of Barbados and managed by a board of directors. GovTech Barbados was established to pursue a whole of government approach to the digital transformation of government, emphasizing citizen-centric, universally accessible public services. The company aims to improve the quality and timeliness of the delivery of the services that people rely on or require from the government by systematically identifying and delivering the technology and other efficiency solutions required. GovTech stands at the center of government's digital transformation and innovation ecosystem and aims to become a world-class digital hub that is publicly owned but operating as an autonomous entity. That's the first one. So that tells us something about GovTech. So I went a little further and I looked, there was an ad. Now I understand, and I asked the question, is this agency, this company running? And there was an ad run some time ago for a chief executive officer at GovTech. And this is who they were looking for. The chief executive officer has overall responsibility for the efficient operation of all the technical, strategic, and corporate functions of the company, including staffing, strategic planning, and delivery of financial and business services and its related deliverables. Internally, the CEO is responsible for providing visionary leadership and embedding a company culture founded on the principles of accountability, continuous learning, innovation, and delivery of superior value to all stakeholders. Externally, this leadership role provides ministries and stakeholders through the Ministry of Science, Technology, Industry, Science, Technology, and Innovation, with advice to ensure widespread collaboration and alignment to common national objectives in e-government and whole of government digital solutions, and related matters of cybersecurity, data privacy, technology skills and capacity, and any relevant emerging technologies. Now, remember, this company was founded,
2023.
And if we go down to the next slide, and we have, at least this is who I found in relation to the company. The board of directors of GovTech Barbados was appointed for a period of 3 years with effect from September 21, 2023. And I put this up because based on that, there's supposed to be an office as directors too, and comprises the following person: George Connolly, Chairman; Lydia McCollin, Deputy Chairman; Winnell Aline Jones, Director; Shade Smith, Director; Noah Haynes, Director; Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Industry, Innovation, Science and Technology, or nominee Director ex officio; Head of the Public Service, Director ex officio. Now, they were appointed in September 2023. I would love to know if we could get an update. One of the things, and I ask questions because I don't have information, is that there's a CEO being paid $21,000 a month. Is that the case?
No.
And if he or she is being paid $21,000 a month, remember I read the position, the role clarification from the ad. Who are they managing? What have they accomplished so far? Any information about this agency? What has it done? Where can we find some details?
I think it's no getting started. But what has me though, right, is that if we're not careful, we will no longer have a public service.
That's an interest. I didn't even think of it like that.
We will no longer have a public service. Every opportunity the government gets, they create some entity that is fully owned by the government. But what it allows them to do is to pay those salaries and to pay those consultant fees at those high rates. What it also allows them to do, it reduces transparency, because you just see one line, you just see a transfer of how much, Maxine? A few million.
Yeah.
You see about 5.4 million, maybe. Yeah.
Mhm.
You see, so you just see a transfer, and then you have to wait for the entity 4 years, 5 years from now to send an annual report for what it did 5 years
You
before.
discover that in
After
in this instance, in the first 2 years, you do nothing.
No, nothing, but you're out $24,000, $21,000 in salary for CEO a month, and all these other consultants, all these other positions. So for me, that's always alarming. Like you're moving away from the traditional service where you have civil servants who are going to work, who are going to get obviously you may have to reskill given some of the skill sets that you need, and maybe that's one of the reasons that they're going outside. But it gives more accountability for what is going to be happening, right, with our taxpayers' money. We will have no transparency in this government. We have no transparency in Hope. We have no transparency even in the Trust Loan Fund. We have no transparency into these entities because they do not produce the reports in a timely manner.
Yeah, precisely.
Right.
No, I think that and that angle I wasn't even thinking about it. And I think I'm glad you raised that, Ryan, because this is a government that came in with the mantra about good governance, transparency, and all of these things. And I recall one of the first things that the last Democratic Labour Party administration had to do was to bring to book a number of things, including debt and so on, that would not have been accounted for because they were done in what they call below the line accounting, which means that you do these things, they're not captured and from the consolidated fund and so on, and people are making these decisions, and that is a very serious consequence of what we're seeing unfold. I mean, if you think in terms of an agency, in fact, I pulled some of this information from the Government Information Service. From the get-go, this administration started up with a parallel, I would call it public relations, communications exercise, with a number of political appointees, etc., but in public, being paid from the public purse in a way that was inconsistent with what was expected. You're looking at something that has drawn your attention. Go ahead, sir.
We're looking at the expenditure that taxpayers have no visibility in. We're talking about $11 million in the last 2 years. So he transfers to GovTech Barbados Limited. 5.5 million 2024 to 2025, another 5.5, sorry, and then 8.2 this year.
And so there's a figure allocated for this year of 8.2 million.
And then it goes to 15 million in 2020, projected to 2027.
No,
right?
Let's look at that very quickly. 5.5 million. Well, I suppose if you're paying some, I don't know when the CEO was recruited, but 21,000 a month by 10 is $210,000 plus part 2 is 252,000 a year. So of this 5 million, the CEO would have gotten $250,000. Right? My math is correct. 21 by 10. Yeah, and then you add on 42. Yes.
Sweet.
And
but there are other expenditure. I mean, at the end of the day, you move it from 5 to 8. Remember, we just look at BADC, BADC flat.
Okay.
Right? We move from 5 to 8. We move from 8 to 15. Right? So it's substantial, as I said, and all we hear is what it's supposed to do. And I'm sure that some of its mandate, when you look at these estimates, efficiency unit. What is an efficiency unit?
What they allocated?
Digital infrastructure. This is not in the purview of a GovTech.
So
right?
these are allocated separate funds.
These are separate funds within the
If
ministry,
you have them in front of you,
right?
what you might have. Let's
Digital infrastructure.
digital infrastructure.
You had $4.1 million this year ending March. You know, allocated another 2.1 for the following year. So
For what purpose? This is the kind of thing we'd have to go into the.
You got going, but see, when you see digital infrastructure, you're thinking software, you're thinking equipment and stuff like that. But when you look at that, out of this 4.1 million, you're talking about less than $1 million is property and plant, machinery, equipment, and even vehicles. So you're not even seeing like payment for software, payment to.
The question is,
you say professional service. Sorry, Maxine, just one share. Okay. Professional services $648,000. Right.
Now the question I would ask, having flagged the professional services fee figure, what? And I suppose we will have to get the big book and look at it. And but so we ask the question: what is the digital infrastructure allocation intended to do? Are they servicing the total public sector? What kinds of services are they providing?
The Telecommunications Act, government's WAN and data center, and the administer the Telecommunications Act, including the monitoring of spectrum and issuing of licenses.
Okay. Now, what does
I don't know what that means. Not technical.
What does this? Well, no, I think those are some of the services you know in terms of radio frequencies and whatever in terms of the spectrum. When people apply for licenses with radio stations or whatever, from my recollection.
But the Telecommunications Act.
What the agency GovTech? So my question is, when you look at that, what does GovTech do in relation to all of these digital telecoms and whatever else services? In other words, you have these things here. My question is, how do these things complement each other, overlap, are totally different? You know, what services? Because you hear all of these things and you read the description. Now, if this entity, GovTech, is supposed to do all of these things, and it is supposed to be bringing technology, why is it taking so long?
But you
they have staff. My understanding is that up to the budgetary proposals, the debate on the budget. Let me put it that way. That they probably had the CEO and nobody else. Now I ask the question: is that true?
Oh.
And if that is true, that as I said, it's taking a long time to go. That that is serious.
You have under the ministry, you have shared services.
And that is intended to do what?
This program provides a single electronic gateway to government information and services in order to facilitate easier interaction of citizens with government.
And so GovTech is doing what? Widespread collaboration and alignment in national law.
And you're talking again, you're talking about almost $10 million in this year ending.
That's the digital,
the shared services. And that's going to double to $20 million in 2025. And beginning April 1st. And the biggest increase here, out of that 6.3 million is professional services.
No, the truth is we cannot necessarily pick up every single detail as to what these things are going to do. But at the end of the day, my concern is that a lot of it sounds as though you are either fragmenting certain services that can come together, or you are replicating, and in essence, are we really utilizing these funds allocated to these individual things in a way that accomplishes the individual objectives of the agencies, and then when taken together, are we really doing what needs to be done?
Money being thrown.
React to some of that, because
money being thrown.
It seems to be highly inefficient. And you touched on something because I'd asked you about, because something I don't know that it falls under BIDC, but it is an entity, something called Future Barbados, because I'm seeing now. Remember that BIDC is servicing a whole set of of it has not BID, sorry, the Ministry of Innovation in Industry, Innovation, Science and Technology is providing a whole set of services to not only the private sector and the public, but also to government. And if we're talking about creating 2,500 jobs, somebody referenced that. We have these entities that have existed, and I heard the reason why this stuck with me is I heard the minister read in when I listened to him, because I made an effort to listen because it was his first speech, that was his first day in the Senate, etc. And he made reference to Future Barbados, and I just wanted to know what it is, and
I don't know what it is either. It looks like, not even sure if it's government.
It's a government entity. It's a government entity. That's what.
These are the.
So I went online, so that's why I asked, because all I saw were some images. It says our commitment. What does that read there?
Our commitment. We are committed to creating a human-centric innovation ecosystem to support our mission and facilitate Barbados's transformation into the best place to live, learn, play, work, dream, and influence the world in the process.
Is there something that goes before that commitment?
Big challenges, incredible talent, investment, government, enablement, leapfrogging innovations that create value and improve human life.
I'm sorry, I didn't see that. I put it up for the audience to see.
It's futurebarbados.bb if anybody's interested in going.
Oh, there's a description of Future
Established
Barbados.
2021. Future Barbados is an innovation and inspiration engine for forward thinkers to harness innovations that improve the quality of life and become impactful enterprises.
No, I will tell you, I've been trying to ask around, because one of the beautiful things of spending so many years teaching is that you were able to put up on people or whatever. My understanding, and I asked the question, is it true that this entity that was just described by Ryan in some very nebulous terms, big challenges multiplied by incredible talent, multiplied by investment, multiplied by government enablement, equals leapfrogging innovations that create value and improve human life? Now, all of that sounds like some gobbledygook to me, but it sounds pretty. But the question I've asked, in the process of multiplying these big challenges by incredible talent, by investment, by government enablement, is government enabling some people by paying consultants, a bunch of them, $6,000 a month at a minimum, to brainstorm, to do what? I don't know. So I heard the minister mention it, and it was started back in 2021.
2021.
So they're brainstorming long, or the government and enabling them.
I don't know enough about it.
But you see, I heard him, and he was identifying as some questions to help Ryan.
I don't know if I can really help Ryan, because I'm not that familiar with the entities too as well. And to me, it sounds like a lot of replication that is happening. And I believe the listeners, the onlookers, those who are watching, they probably can, for themselves, ascertain that it's probably free money that's being given away, because in the absence of reports, what is happening within these different setups that you have, we don't know. And you already have a ministry, then you have these persons, these individuals, and I can't remember seeing anything in the newspaper, anything about them, but just what they're doing, role, even in schools. I don't see any benefit happening there. If they're at the same GovTech, they're the persons who are resourcing the laptops and different equipment for us, because even like I said, the teachers, we have some teachers who don't have a proper device. So all that money is being spent, so we don't know what purpose, when it can be spent at schools, other government departments, etc. So I believe that some clarity probably be by this week. After listening to the show, they'll probably give
not them.
Yeah, we probably will.
So Ryan, let's start a list of issues that we need some clarity, starting with this entity called Future Barbados. It was found.
Future Barbados and GovTech.
Was it GovTech? I mean, sorry,
Future Barbados,
GovTech.
I think I need an explanation of these costs in this ministry, though,
yeah.
because you see a lot of what could be overlapping in terms of the mandate of them, and you're seeing a lot of spend in professional services. I'm concerned about that. And one of those sections there, the professional services was equal to what they spent in payroll for the staff, for the team. So it is a big line item in this ministry in terms of consulting.
And my question is, if you're looking, you mean at the whole mist, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And my question, therefore, is I start from the premise that there seems to be, as a consequence of or as a decision to move away from recruiting public officers or employees to persons that are retained for, on a contract for services rather than a contract of service. So people are retained as consultants. Will we get to see, first of all, the question would be, who are these consultants? How many are they? What are they retained
What
to
skills
do?
are they bringing?
What are they bringing? What have they done to justify their existence, the pay? I mean, for example, if what I heard that they were paying back in 2021 when this was started, some of these, and I go back to the Future Barbados one, where these people are supposed to come up with whatever it is, 6,000. How many were there? What have they produced?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it a situation where you have, and I like to dwell into some of these things, because as I said, from the time I'd heard something about it, when I heard the minister raised it sent me in search of information. Mm-hmm. Like you, I came up against a strange website because it didn't really help us to understand. And having started so long, the question was, what have they achieved? Mm-hmm. What have they proposed to government? Has government been able to accept and implement or plan to implement any of that? Mm-hmm. It is worrisome because you juxtapose that. In fact, let me put another question to you, Ryan, because I think, and you guys can tell me, gentlemen, not you guys. I try to avoid these American slangy things. Sorry. If you can tell me, Ryan or Nathaniel, if you are happy, in other words, let's contrast all of this wastage or this excessive spending or spending that is shrouded in mystery. What is happening on the ground? What's happening? You're not only a manager working with staff. You also operate in a constituency. You've been in one of the nicest constituencies, having right, Ryan?
Yeah, you are.
That's, as I said, that's the place of my birth. Mm-hmm. But in all seriousness, but it also is a constituency that characterizes some of the realities of Barbados. You have some persons who are challenged financially, and so you see that you're in the classroom, you see children coming from a cross section of households and
their homes too. I've been on 2 homes too as well. Mm-hmm. Brian, go first.
No,
what's happening on the ground?
Maxine, you bring me back to my presentation last Monday. The amount of money that the government is earning, and you're not seeing it in our communities, you're not seeing it in our villages, you're not seeing it in our business areas. Bridgestone looks worse. Live Hospital is the same. Once you get through the ER, the new exterior of the emergency, it is the same experience. The polyclinics are in the same condition. The schools are worse. The resource center in Dickens has not been open since 2018. Dickens Primary School is in need of a facelift. There's some challenges at Eagle Hall Primary School. I'm just saying, people think that this is a lot of political talk. This is just reality. This is just reality. So they're not utilizing the significant amount of resources that are at their disposal to deal with the real issues. Now they're running around trying to fix every road, Um,
Something was
some of those that don't want need fixing right away. They're addressing some of those for some reason or not. But the point is, they're now trying to what we are calling nitpick at the little things that they think will give them will score political points, right? And the $40 billion that this government has at its disposal since 2018 May has not been to the benefit of the persons who voted them in. I am sure that the persons who voted for them are ashamed
Yeah.
and disappointed. They are. So you're not seeing the spend, you're seeing everything in almost the same condition that it was 7 years ago. That is the feeling. So when you come and you hear that a consultant is getting $40,000 in Hope a month, a consultant in GovTech is getting $21,000, a group of persons that we know nothing about getting $6,000 a month, they're just a drop in the bucket. The extent to this whole spending is unknown to the Barbadian public. I heard the Prime Minister, I think it was yesterday, make a statement that they're going to enter into a public-private partnership when the geriatric hospital is relocated. We don't know what she's talking about.
A conference.
No, but I mean, nobody knows. The decision has already been made.
Yes.
Just like the decision was made for Whole Town, just like it was made for James Lane, just like it was made also for the plantation that they were going to buy that was made public, Drax Hall, that was only made public by the UK media. So when people are faced with these things, right, they can't feel good. The trust is not there, and the disappointment is high. But they definitely cannot trust this government. And you just highlighted some of the expenditure, and that's probably not just a drop in the bucket for what this government is spending, and we're not seeing the results. We're not seeing the results for all the spending.
Daniel?
Yeah, well, I will just piggyback to because Brian said the thing that are actually in my constituency. I was first like it was city. You see the government right now, they're running around. You see roads getting fixed. I mean, they're getting big up, paved pretty fast. Jasmine Avenue, my constituency in British Hill, and they're getting paved pretty fast. And I remember too in my gap, Wasteland, where the government came with, had the Prime Minister, the Deputy, and the Minister for Microsoft, along with a big entourage, MTW, supervisors, you name it, they came in the gap at evening time. And the gap was really, really bad. It's falling, crooked, whatever. And this is about 3-4 years ago. And they came saying they can do the road, they can fix the road, but they're looking for votes. You know, after elections that in January, they came in, I think in February, and they just scraped the road and then patched it. And the guy said they're coming back. They've never returned. And I saw these other roads just getting fixed pretty fast. That doesn't necessarily need the work, as Ryan would have said. Another situation always too, the geriatric. I spoke to people down in Beckles Hill, and at first what they said to me is that when they asked the minister, he said he knew nothing about it, which is very strange that he's the minister about the relocating them and all that is. You know,
that's
what he said.
That's
what he said to people. But obviously, we saw the move going on the highway. It's this big, massive building going up, new geriatric. And those persons, they said that they're supposed to relocate. To this day, I'm not sure. I have to speak to one or two people if there's any other message that have been sent or any other understanding in terms of that they're going to move. Because obviously, persons have built some nice homes. They want to get back the same size house, a nice area there too, with location in terms of work and children and school and everything. You got to look at these persons to space. But obviously, these deals were probably done a long time, and they were leaked. And persons have an idea what's happening. But we'll go back then to students moving around. You have a situation where in this day and age, I remember the Prime Minister talking about getting rid of moving from pit toilets to 5,000 pit toilets, and no one should have those things. You have situations house that can probably take you about at least 7 houses, roof bad, have some children in housing, they have no light, water. I was at a house, and I'm sure the Minister of Constituency noticed there. I saw one of my old students bringing a bucket of water with Nelwood's friends. I thought he lived there. He said no. He said he's having a friend. They have no water. Light. I went in the nighttime up to there. The house in darkness, windows out. They have some little children there. The flooring is gone, except some of the parts. You can see tear down. The roof is leaking, and we have persons in this time living in those costs. And we have a minister who's responsible for,
People
taking care of
and social care.
Social care.
Mhm.
And I would think, especially too, in the house too behind his constituency office, that for the longest while we're trying to get. I believe that if you're really sincere in getting it done, whether or not you made the statement that the persons don't want to move, because I spoke to individuals and they were ready, they will let you help. They've been trying to get a rent house, the government will pay, and that person not gonna get a rent house to any individual unless they have the money nowadays.
Mhm.
And when they hear government can pay, people back off because they didn't get money. So we have serious situations on the ground. We have a lot of money being thrown out.
Right.
Some cases, you have persons who are consultants and they have another post and some of these individuals making over 20 to 40 grand when the month come. And you have situations where persons who train hard every day to make a little, they don't have a decent
But
job.
that's not to cut your straight there, but you made an important point, right? Which is there are some social problems that still prevail. One of them is paying landlords on time. They have not solved a simple issue like that, but yet people can get paid every month and they have not produced anything.
Correct.
And they talk about
Right.
all of this innovative whatever and all these services that they no
How easy it is to give somebody a check for 3,000, nobody can already host for 3 months. Sorry, for 3 months in advance.
Right.
To give the comfort that
They
they will be paid, that they have the revenue or whatever to get people out of these conditions, right? So there's very simple issues that could be solved if the government wanted them to be
But
solved.
you have to realize too, and what persons are listening, this government is becoming a government of welfare. They're looking to push persons to depend, practicing that they really have to depend on them going forward. So, and we know persons, when they're vulnerable, what little money they can get, they can take. So we have a government trying to practice that going forward, welfare, where if you listen carefully, yes, Ms. Wynn, they were talking about what, in terms of expanding, not saying that persons, they will have individuals in society who
Need
need
help.
help,
Yeah.
but it seems that you're pushing more persons to fall in that category, in terms of actually providing solutions, jobs, creating more industries, what's not going forward for these individuals to work, because we want people working, able to stand on their own.
I think I'm going to start by that point, and in looking at the whole issue of the impact of the currently and the ongoing situation in Barbados, the failure of ministries, and in this case, we're talking about MIS, to engage in activities to create jobs. Pile on top of that, the excessive spending and wastage
Yes.
on a set of what I would describe as nebulous entities, which sometimes either replicate each other or are seeking to do what public sector agencies supported by the necessary personnel and resources can do, that you're wasting money. People are living high on the hog, and they're enjoying themselves, and then they're creating mendicants, people who are depending on them for to exist, and a lot of problems are going unaddressed. I will say this. I had a call recently from a young woman who was speaking to me about her. She just called me and she said, "Look, Miss McClean, I've called you because I am just feeling totally frustrated, hopeless when I think of my children, teenagers, young adults, and looking around Barbados and wondering what will become of my children as they look for work." And this was not exaggeration. this is somebody I've spoken to on the phone. We have never met in person, but they listen to these programs. They listen to other programs. They talk to their neighbors. They observe the lifestyles of those, to use an expression that my former colleague and my friend Dennis Kelman would refer as the too few, that there are these people who are enjoying life in an excessive way, but Barbadians are, many of them are suffering the cost of living. I mean, as you said, we have seen, because of those inflationary realities, a level of taxation, of tax take that the government has.
Yes.
And you're not seeing it converted into simple, fast solutions to impact the quality of life. And the person said to me when she called, now this is somebody who's working, you know, but who obviously is not making ends meet. She said, you know, one of the things that we have not been able to do, she said, when are you going to talk about the impact? That's why I raised it with you. The impact of all that is happening around us on many people in Barbados. Everybody does not come out and explain how hard it is. But she said it's affecting people's well-being, their mental state. And my question to many of these, but then again, when I look at the situation of many of these people, they've never experienced firsthand what it means to do without, to be without, to need. And so we get all these fancy things and we're looking after our friends and family or whatever, and Barbadians are suffering. And it is growing. And people stop me. I mean, because of the things that I've done over the years, I cannot go to the supermarket, come out to church, park my car in a car park before somebody wants to share some of their concerns. Maybe you can talk about this. Maybe you can talk about that. So what I'm hearing from both of you is that it is not all, joy and happiness for the average Barbadian, right? And I don't know if you want to.
No, I agree. Everything you and Nathaniel said. My issue has always been that the government has contributed significantly to the increased cost of living of regular persons. What we've started to see over the years is that we also contributed to the hardship by wastage, not using those resources that are afforded to them to the benefit of the people. And now we're seeing it almost in a way that could be considered as corruption, as relates to the whole concept of hope, the whole concept of a GovTech, everything that they can do outside of government, but using taxpayers' money is what they have been about.
I think.
Right.
Many of our people who are suffering some challenges, etc. So when you think about what can we do perhaps in our communities, especially when we think in terms of our children, I mean, what are some of the things that we can do?
Well, children, as a parent, a teacher, and you obviously know some children are coming from varying backgrounds where they met up. Some children, I visited a home, I remember, where the children were having actually a sweet drink and some corn girls for dinner, watching TV. And that is the norm for them. It was, we have situations obviously as well where in communities there's nothing much to do in terms of activity wise. And even where I said, I remember this, but this is not the small children, this was like a group in one of the community centers They were doing something young ladies doing there, but in terms of having a younger person, they were just running up and down the road, nothing structured for them on the evenings to do. And I believe going forward too, that is something Democratic Party that we look at in terms of providing to for those individuals, because we have children who have different brain talents, and we find that, like in my constituency, we have cricket, we have football, and we have basketball, we have netball, and we still have one or two individuals still trying to make sure you keep those children or get some of the young ladies be involved with something positive, some young men involved with positive, because we find that they're gravitating towards something else, that puts them up going forward in the future in another area that we don't want them to get into. Right? So I guess having programs like a big, remember overseas calls big brothers, or so we have persons who can, talk, because some of these individuals need talking to, involving them to see a different light to something that they're not accustomed to. Because I was discussing this morning actually with another teacher where she was saying to me that this is the country that when she was doing a lesson, although the children are in that parish, the children they're not familiar with that, I think the place of interest that she was looking at, they're not familiar. So they don't, although they live in that parish, they don't really go out in terms of, and some of their ideas basically are being probably being unblocked, or, sometimes individuals may find some of them just in the house. So we have to try to see if we can have programs to have these children involved, because I don't want to say gone are the days, but I remember like activities we have, like I think it was crochet, you call it, I need to work, people, younger person stuff, cake baking is still a thing, because I know some young ladies that are involved in cupcakes, the fancy cupcakes, to make a little money too, right? So getting involved, having little tournaments too for these young individuals. So I put it on in my scope as a teacher and being involved in sports, put something on for the children to participate and feel part of. You give them some medals, some little things, other little accolades and stuff like that. Let them feel part. There's something more for them out there, because everybody's may not be academic. Some are, these are children who might perform well in extracurricular activities. So we have to get them involved in, other activities happening in the community.
All right, Ryan. Any thoughts? I noticed that we are fast approaching the 9 o'clock hour.
No, community is important. Community is very important, and I think that even within this Ministry of Industry, Innovation, Science, and Technology, that the government has a program called Regathering, right? And Regathering, if I was to Google it now or search it in this document, it will come up multiple times on the tourism, on the youth, on the energy. But we're not saying innovation is something that we can't have that approach to innovation. Where our community centers can't be hubs for some of the things that we can't do at school. Because as you said, you can't afford the curriculum. You can't keep adding. How many community centers even having a computer printer? That somebody can go and Google search, print a CV. I mean, basic things. And if they do have any of these things, they're locked up when people want access to them. So there's not a person that's really, warden in charge and giving access and things. Because there's this notion that people destroy everything. And while there's an opportunity, while these things happen, we have to believe in our communities and invest in our communities, right? And I think we need to do more to build up community. Industry will come. Some of those new innovation ideas, some of those new industries can be birthed out of our communities as well, right? One of those things could be, you're talking about even how we look at tourism. This thing about getting more tourism dollars being spent. We don't have a strong tourism. We have a strong oysters tourism product, but we don't have a strong community tourism product, as an example. But it's been worsened over the whole advent of all the shootings and the gun crime. But I think that we need to do a little more around building our communities. If you hold much, you know, if you're from Freehill, if you hold a good little event in Freehill, people are gonna come out. They come out, they have a good time. They will socialize. They will stay in the little corners, and you know, they will come. Some of them might mingle more, but there's an appreciation for community activity. There's appreciation for family, to keep families involved in the community. Ralph, our leader, Mr. Thorne, made an excellent point about housing and the vacant lots and the derelict buildings within our communities to build out instead of always having to go and look for new spaces. Excellent idea. Because when you are within a community and you're in a household that has 7 or 8 persons, and you can move to the next gap, right? Yep. With 3 bedrooms or 2 bedrooms, but you can move to the next gap for that opportunity to have a home in the community your family grew up in. You still have that family network. You can still go and work. Your mother or your grandmother can still look after the kids. It's so important. Those are the things that we lose out now when we move into our neighborhoods and stuff like that. So anything to try to contain and maintain a community life is important to Barbados, and we should do everything to maintain that.
Gentlemen, I think that we could continue this conversation for another hour, but unfortunately we do not have that hour. And I want to thank you very much, Senator Walters and Mr. Boyce, Ryan and Nathaniel, for joining me. And it was a pleasure being part of this discussion on DLP TV, on its voices for the people. I think that we had an opportunity to look at what must be seen as a critical ministry. And I trust that we can continue this, looking at some of the others in the future.